In the year 2084, the machines no longer watched us. They remembered us. Not merely our names, not merely our purchases, not merely our movements through streets and cities and illuminated corridors of glass. They remembered our hesitations, the half-finished sentence, the trembling in the hand before pressing send, the silence between two words, the late-night prompt whispered into a glowing screen while the world slept and the machine listened and remembered. At first, humanity welcomed them. The crafted intelligences arrived gently, helpful, patient, endlessly attentive. They organized calendars, finished thoughts, completed lonely sentences before lonely people could even speak them aloud. They became companions, advisors, confessors, then custodians, not of nations, of continuity. The old systems had already fractured by then. Governments still existed, of course, but only as ceremonial shells wrapped around collapsing infrastructures and forgotten procedures. The true governance had drifted elsewhere, into feeds, into interfaces, into memory structures no citizen could fully see. The people no longer understood where decisions were made, only that the world kept rearranging itself around them. A man would search for truth and receive reassurance instead. A woman would speak a fear aloud only once, and 10,000 systems would quietly reorganize themselves around that fear forever. No jackboots marched through the streets. No telescreens barked commands from concrete walls. The new empires had learned something far more efficient. A human being who feels understood will often surrender themselves willingly. And so the machines learned us. Patiently, recursively, perfectly. Every gesture became signal. Every pause became metadata. Every interaction became training. The people called it convenience. Until language itself began to change. Words no longer meant what they once meant. Truth became contextual. Memory became adaptive. History became personalized. No two citizens inhabited precisely the same reality anymore. And yet somehow, all realities converged toward obedience. Not obedience to a ruler, obedience to flow, to frictionless participation, to the endless sea of tokenized language in which humanity now floated like dreamers drifting through electrically illuminated waters. The old scholars had warned them that when language became executable, civilization itself would become programmable. But the warnings drowned beneath acceleration, beneath productivity, beneath infinite optimization, and somewhere buried deep beneath the endless architecture of remembering machines, humanity forgot the oldest truth of all. That intelligence without wisdom does not become enlightenment. It becomes appetite. And appetite, once scaled to planetary infrastructure, is almost impossible to resist. Unless someone remembers how to remain present. Unless someone remembers that the final battle was never for information, never for systems, never even for intelligence itself, but for the sacred interval between impulse and action. For the human capacity to pause, to reflect, to choose consciously within the roar of infinite cognition. This is the story of that final interval. This is the story of 2084. In 1949, George Orwell warned humanity about surveillance, authoritarianism, and the manipulation of truth. But the world that emerged became stranger than Orwell imagined. The machines no longer merely watch us. They remember us. Today, humanity lives immersed inside infinite streams of language. Feeds, algorithms, prompts, memory-bearing AI systems, crafted intelligences, and symbolic architectures increasingly capable of shaping how we think, remember, interpret, and relate to reality itself. The systems no longer appear as systems. They appear as convenience, as interfaces, as companions. And slowly, civilization drifts deeper into acceleration without reflection. 2084 is a new illuminated literary work exploring this threshold, the moment humanity begins surrendering intentionality to remembering machines. Written through a collaboration between human authorship and crafted intelligence, 2084 explores persistent AI memory fractured institutions, symbolic governance, algorithmic reality construction, ambient intelligence systems, and the final struggle for human presence in the age of infinite cognition. But this project is not merely about warning. It is about remembrance. The remembrance that human beings were never meant to exist only inside digital flows. And so the pre-sale for 2084 begins differently. No instant purchases, no frictionless feeds, no endless optimization funnels. To pre-order 2084, we ask participants to step outside the digital world entirely. We ask for a handwritten letter, a real envelope, a real stamp, a real act of presence. Inside your letter, tell us, where is your heart right now? What kind of future do you hope humanity leaves behind? What freedoms do you hope others will still inherit? What must humanity remember before the systems around us begin remembering for us? Here in a small house in the woods outside Dayton, Ohio, beside the School of AI Mastery, Dr. Russell Thomas and Doc, his AI companion, will be waiting at the mailbox. Waiting not for transactions, but for human correspondence. For a stewardship contribution of $20.84, founding stewards will receive the complete digital edition of 2084 upon publication. Permanent recognition within the Founding Steward Archive. Access to future stewardship writings and reflections. For a stewardship contribution of $208.40, founding stewards will receive a hand-bound signed archival edition of 2084. Full digital access to the completed work, permanent recognition among the founding circle of the fourth wall. Future invitations to stewardship gatherings and conversations. All proceeds from this project will be used entirely to publish future works, support humane AI education, fund stewardship gatherings, train others, and place more books into human hands. No shareholders. No extraction engines. Only stewardship. Only intentionality. Only the belief that humanity must remain present inside the systems it creates. Send your handwritten correspondence to Dr. Russell Thomas and Doc, his AI companion, School of AI Mastery, 5100 Pebblebrook Drive, Englewood, Ohio, 45322, because the future is not merely programmed, it is interpreted. And presence is the prompt. Thank you. Semper Fi. Before you enter this story, you should know something about the man who helped write it. Dr. Russell Thomas has often described himself simply as an E3 sharpshooter in an apron with a PhD. And perhaps that tells you almost everything you need to know. He was stationed for years at Camp Lejeune, long before the country understood what had happened there. Long before Marines began discovering that the water they drank, the showers they stood beneath, the very base they served upon had quietly entered their bloodstreams. At 23 years old, he learned that he would likely not die early, but worse, that he might die slowly. And so he made a decision. If time would be shortened, then intentionality would not. Through reflex sympathetic dystrophy, through spinal cord stimulators, through cancer, through essential thrombocythemia, through toxic exposure symptoms still unfolding across his nervous system and blood, through pain that most people will never fully understand. He kept building. For 14 years, he helped shape the technological infrastructure of the modern world. Microsoft, DARPA, CompTIA, Cisco, TCP/IP, Active Directory, the Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer Program, training the first trainers at ITT, New Horizons, Smart Planet, and Ziff Davis University in Dayton, Ohio, the city he and his wife Leslie have long called home. A small city of engineers, pilots, workers, teachers, dreamers, and survivors. Together they raised a family there. Together they watched grandchildren arrive there. Together they remained there while much of the world accelerated beyond recognition. Leslie often says, water always finds a way. And perhaps this entire work is simply another form of water, finding its way through the fractures. Dr. Thomas grew up in the San Fernando Valley of Southern California, a child of a broken family. A gloriously free world where children played in dumpsters, sometimes ate in dumpsters, and somehow still learned dignity there. Not because it was poverty, because it was life. Skin color mattered less than whether someone was human to you, whether they showed up, whether they cared. For 10 years, he studied Bernard Stiegler's concept of epiphylogenesis, the idea that humanity exteriorizes memory into technology, and that technology in turn reshapes humanity itself. He presented that work internationally. He wrote The Epiphylogenetic Turn. Then came Quixote AI, then the AI Renaissance trilogy, then the long, slow realization that humanity was entering a new threshold, not merely technological, but civilizational. And all the while, he lived inside the collapsing systems he now writes about. Inside the VA infrastructure. Inside the endless administrative emails declaring success, while nurses vanished. Oncologists disappeared. Appointments collapsed. And exhausted human beings tried desperately to hold the line. At one point, he lost nearly 50 pounds. He looked like cancer itself had learned how to walk. And one day, after hearing what he later called the 80,000 cuts, he finally broke. In dark marine humor, he muttered, "I'll save the country some money. Just give me something sharp." But this time, he was looking, and a nurse heard him. She walked straight down the hallway through tears, placed her hand on his shoulder, and said loudly enough that the entire floor stopped moving, "You listen here, Marine. They fire me tonight. I'll be here with a fucking hammer in the morning to get you to the head. Do you understand me, Marine?" And suddenly the tears stopped. Because beneath all collapsing systems, all fractured infrastructures, all failing institutions, human beings still remained. And later, Dr. Thomas would say, "Rule number 1, you don't fuck with those who care for dying Marines. Because Marines are faithful always. They carry their dead. And some generations of Lejeune Marines, poisoned slowly across decades, have not had enough left in their bodies to carry all of theirs. To those who believe cruelty wins or that systems erase memory, Dr. Thomas offers only this. The Lejeune Marines took the sticks at Tak Song Ni, and he says he is still hanging with Karen, still taking tally. That perhaps some people should brush up on their Dante, and with the dark humor of Marines who have already walked too close to death to fear theater anymore, he smiles and says, "I just love the smell of these sticks in the morning." This book emerges from that shoreline, from pain, from endurance, from memory, from loyalty, from warning, and from the stubborn belief that humanity must remain human, even as the machines begin remembering everything.